Shirley Caesar's life story begins in profound poverty, the sort of hardship that would have shattered most individuals long before they ever reached adulthood. She entered the world on October 13, 1938, inside a tiny, overcrowded residence at 2209 Chiaqua Street in Durham, North Carolina, arriving as the 10th of 13 children. Every corner of that home bore the burden of too many residents, too little income, and an endless list of pressing needs. Her father, Big Jim Caesar, endured grueling 12-hour shifts at the Liggett & Myers Tobacco Company during the Great Depression, separating tobacco stems while engulfed in thick dust, earning less than $10 each week. Her mother, Hallie, also labored there until her physical health collapsed in 1939. The house constantly reeked of cured tobacco, and accompanying that smell came persistent hunger, unrelenting tension, and a type of anxiety that never truly slept. Most meals consisted of little more than bologna sandwiches or cornmeal mush stretched thinly to feed 13 hungry mouths. Winter coats were patched together with rags, and the family had no indoor plumbing until 1945. Rent payments fell behind so frequently that eviction notices became as routine as the air the family breathed. Yet within that struggle, music stood as the one element that felt larger than the home's confining walls. Big Jim was not merely a factory laborer. He was also a commanding gospel vocalist, a massive man standing 6 feet 2 inches and weighing approximately 250 pounds. On weekends, he led the Just Came 4, a Durham-based gospel quartet capable of filling churches and tents with raw, unrefined power. When Big Jim sang, witnesses claimed the very room trembled. Even more significantly, the music provided something poverty could never steal: hope. Big Jim believed in Shirley long before anyone else recognized her name. Night after night, he told her that her voice would someday nourish entire nations. He brought her onto the stage while she was still a tiny child, and by age 6, she performed Jesus Loves Me before audiences while tips were tossed onto the platform. At home, after his factory shift ended at 6 in the evening, rehearsals would commence in the shack, and he mentored her with all the passion he possessed, demanding power and spirit in her singing. To him, music was not ornamentation, it was survival. Then, on January 15, 1946, everything fell apart. Big Jim collapsed during a rehearsal following a brain seizure. He was only 42 years old. Shirley was just 7 when she watched men carry her father's body out on a door slab. No ambulance would respond to a black family in Durham. Hallie was already physically restricted by an old factory injury, and now the man who had carried the family was gone. The funeral cost $150, an enormous sum covered only through gospel connections and charitable assistance. Soon the rent fell behind once more. Welfare services turned them away. Some children gathered scrap metal, others stole coal from passing trains. One of Shirley's brothers was hospitalized for malnutrition. At home, Hallie watered down grits and simply kept pressing forward. That pain could have silenced young Shirley, but instead it drove her toward the very thing her father had planted within her. If Big Jim had declared that her voice would feed nations, now that voice had to feed the family first. By 1948, at 10 years old, the church became her lifeline. At Mount Gilead Baptist Church, she sang Precious Lord before 300 people. Her hands shook, but her voice did not fail her. She had no formal training. What she possessed was memory, her father's sound echoing in her ears, his power, his phrasing. When the offering plate returned with money from that performance, every dollar went directly to her mother. Soon pastors began inviting her back, then elsewhere. Durham churches typically paid children nothing, but Shirley was already becoming an exception. People could sense something rare within her. By the spring of 1949, crowds grew even larger. Older people who had witnessed singers all their lives watched this young girl and recognized she was not ordinary. Sometimes after services, people hugged her and handed her food, fried chicken from an elder, a kind word enough to ease the strain for one more day. By 1950, at only 12, Shirley's world had expanded far beyond Durham. She began traveling with evangelist Leroy Johnson, billed as Baby Shirley, opening revival meetings in tents packed with hundreds of people. She rode Greyhound buses through the Carolinas and Virginia, often at night, sleeping on seats. The pay was about $15 per night plus meals, more than her father once earned at the factory. For a child from a household where every coin counted, that was enormous. Still, the money did not erase the difficulty. She was very young, and the travel was grueling. Sometimes there were threats, sometimes there was fear. Yet she kept going, one weekend at a time, one service at a time, building stamina, learning how to stand before adults and command a room, learning how to shift from singing into a preaching tone. Other girls her age were living normal teenage lives. Shirley was riding buses, standing under tent lights, and helping feed a family. Then came the breakthrough. In late 1951, at just 13, Shirley recorded, "I'd Rather Have Jesus." The session took place in Cincinnati for Federal Records, and it became a turning point. The record came out on 78 revolutions per minute discs, and copies began moving through church networks and black radio stations. It traveled from hand to hand, from church to church. People heard that voice and remembered it. Backed with "I Know Jesus Will Save," the release grew into a genuine early gospel hit. She was paid a flat session fee, but that first record accomplished something bigger than paying a bill. It proved her father had been right to believe in her. By 15, Shirley was already being discussed in church circles as the girl with the voice from North Carolina. In 1956, at 18, she enrolled at North Carolina College, now North Carolina Central University, studying business education because she was practical enough to know life needed structure and support. For a while, she balanced both worlds, student life during the week, then singing and ministering on weekends. It was exhausting. Then, in 1957, that tension broke in a way she never forgot. During a typing test in class, Shirley heard her name spoken aloud, though no one around her had said it. She walked out before finishing the test. Later, lying on her bed, she heard the same voice again, clear and direct, telling her that she had been called from her mother's womb and anointed to preach the gospel. After that, she stopped trying to shape herself around an ordinary plan. Music and ministry became her life. That same year, the Caravans came through Durham. They were already the most important female gospel group in America. Shirley, still young and still technically in college, followed them, traveled after them, and boldly asked for an audition. She told Albertina Walker she knew all the parts. And when she sang, her range, timing, and power stunned them. She was invited to join. At 19, Shirley packed a small suitcase, left Durham behind, and went alone to Chicago. She left her widowed mother, her struggling home, and everything familiar because she believed the call was moving her forward. From 1958 to 1966, she spent 8 intense years with the Caravans, and those years sharpened her into a national force. The group toured constantly, filled churches, recorded major gospel songs, and became known across the country. Shirley entered as a teenager, but she quickly became one of the group's driving powers. Her voice did not simply blend, it broke through. People began asking for the Caravans featuring Shirley Caesar. Over those years, she did not miss a single concert. Weekend after weekend, she moved through hard roads, multiple services, late nights, and long drives, and still delivered in full voice. At the same time, churches were beginning to call for her alone, not just as a singer, but as evangelist Shirley Caesar. That was rare, especially for a woman. In 1966, Shirley made the boldest move of her career so far. She left the Caravans at the height of their fame. To many in the gospel world, that looked like madness. She had no secure solo machine waiting for her, no easy landing, just faith, a Bible, a suitcase, and the conviction that she had outgrown staying where she was. People said she would disappear within 2 years. But Shirley had already lived too much life to mistake comfort for calling. She formed the Shirley Caesar Singers. Her younger sister and Belle became part of the group, and together they rehearsed in church basements and rented halls. Within a few years, the people who had predicted disaster watched her rise anyway. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, her recordings and tours were reaching deeper and wider. The risk that looked reckless became the foundation of something lasting. Starting in the early 1970s, Shirley Caesar turned the whole stage into church. She would walk out in white robes and begin what people later called a running sermon. For 30 to 40 minutes, she would preach, tell stories, shift into different voices, lift the crowd, and then slide right into the song. One moment, she was speaking like a pastor, the next singing with full force. People in big arenas felt as though they had been dropped straight into a packed black church. There was shouting, clapping, crying, and testifying. This became known as sermonic gospel, her signature for decades. In 1971, at the 14th Annual Grammy Awards, Shirley Caesar won her first Grammy for Best Soul Gospel Performance with Put Your Hand in the Hand of the Man from Galilee. That first Grammy mattered because it was the beginning of a long road that would eventually bring her 12 Grammy trophies over the years, including wins in 1980, 1984, 1985, 1992, 1993, 1995, 1996, 1999, and 2000. In 2017, she received the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. Beyond the Grammys, she gathered around 15 Dove Awards, roughly 14 Stellar Awards, an NAACP Lifetime Achievement Award, an induction into the Gospel Music Hall of Fame in 2000. In 2010, she received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, a rare honor for a gospel singer. On June 27, 1983, 44-year-old Shirley Caesar married 64-year-old Bishop Harold Ivory Williams. Together they co-pastored Mount Calvary Word of Faith Church in Raleigh, and after his death on July 4, 2014, she stepped forward as senior pastor. In May 1984, at age 45, she graduated magna cum laude from Shaw University with a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, proof that delayed dreams can still be completed. In 1987, she ran for Durham City Council, won the seat, and served from 1987 to 1991, speaking up for poor and elderly housing, jobs, and local business growth. From a tiny overcrowded house on Chiaqua Street to the Grammy stage, from a 7-year-old watching her father's body carried out on a door slab to the Hollywood Walk of Fame, Shirley Caesar's voice never stopped. She sang for the hungry. She sang for the broken. She sang because her father once told her she would feed nations, and somehow, across 87 years, she did exactly that.